Um, Now, some arguments for superfoods is that they'll contain much higher levels of vitamins and minerals and antioxidants, and given that most people's diets are very nutritionally depleted, that can certainly be a big advantage. There are also suggestions that they can help to detoxify the body because of their high content of nutrients. The arguments against, one of the main arguments is that high levels of a nutrient is not necessarily a good thing, especially if it's not suited to your metabolism. And some people's metabolisms will need much higher or lower quantities of specific nutrients than others, whilst the opposite may be true for the metabolisms of other people. So this is a subject I'll talk a little bit more on later on in the slideshow. So usually superfoods are a lot more expensive too. The next area I'd like to look at is juicing. Now, juicing simply involves squeezing the juice from the fruit or vegetables by putting them in through a juicer or a blender. Now, sometimes nuts and seeds and other ingredients are also added, but predominantly the ingredients tends to be fruits and vegetables. So the argument for juicing is that it gives you a highly concentrated levels of vitamins, minerals, antioxidants, phytonutrients, and enzymes. And it's one of the fastest ways to get concentrated levels of nutrients into the body. To get the same amount, you would need to consume a lot of fruits and vegetables. There is also a valid argument to be said that it can have an alkalizing effect on the blood, and as a result of that, help to draw out toxins from the cells of the body. So, in terms of the arguments against juicing, often it involves using a lot of starchy vegetables and fruits, which for some people may cause blood sugar imbalances. It can be very high, often it can be very high in potassium and carbohydrates, which may not suit people of certain metabolisms. If consumed without the pulp, much of the beneficial fibre will be eliminated, so it's always good to add the pulp back into the juice. And those with poor digestion may not absorb many of the nutrients because it's such a high concentrated level. If you're very deficient in the the different areas of digestion, whether that be enzymes or bacteria or stomach acids, these can all have a big impact on whether you're going to effectively absorb those nutrients. So that can certainly be an argument against it. The nutrients in the juice will also become oxidized and damaged by any light or oxygen that they are exposed to immediately following the juicing. Obviously, whilst they're contained in the within the actual fruit as a whole, they're protected. As soon as they're exposed outside that, and for this reason, they either need to be stored in an airtight container in a cool, dark environment, or they need to be drunk immediately. Otherwise, you're wasting your time because a lot of the nutrients will be damaged by the time you get to consume them. So the other issue with juicing is it can take a lot of time to prepare and clean up afterwards, which puts a lot of people off the idea. The next area to look at is dehydrating. Now, dehydrating is a process that's used typically by raw foodists to dry out the food, and it does this by obviously reducing the water content in the food. So the arguments for this is that it's a good alternative to cooking and maintains enzyme and nutrient levels, and it also allows more variation in the diet, especially a raw food diet. Another argument for it is that some cooked and processed foods can be imitated using a dehydrator, whilst the food is still kept in a raw food state. So things like biscuits and crackers can often be imitated using a dehydrator. Now, when it comes to the arguments against it, It can certainly be time consuming to prepare foods for dehydrating. And also some vitamins are water soluble, and what that means is when you dehydrate them, the chances are you're going to eliminate a lot of those vitamins from the food. The next area I'd like to talk about is sprouting. Now, sprouting is a practice of soaking, draining and then rinsing at regular intervals the food until they germinate or develop a sprout. This is typically done with nuts, seeds, and grains and legumes. The argument for such methods is that it helps to destroy the phytic acid found in grains, legumes, nuts and seeds that can inhibit the enzymes that are responsible for the absorption of minerals. So without going through this process, what you'll find is you can consume these foods and they can inhibit your uptake of minerals from the food that you've eaten, which is obviously not going to benefit you from a health perspective. Another benefit is that sprouting can actually increase the vitamin and mineral and enzyme levels within the food, and for this reason it can be extremely beneficial. The argument against sprouting is typically it takes a lot more preparation and organisation in order to consume sprouted foods on a regular basis. The next area to look at is fermented foods. Now, alcohol is created from the process of fermentation, typically using grains or potatoes and yeast, but also other foods can actually be fermented as well. Typically this is done for health reasons, and the process tends to involve culturing certain foods over a number of days using bacteria. Typically vegetables such as pickles and cabbage are done, and dairy as well. Things like yogurt, for example, are used. Some raw foodists use this process and others do not, arguing that they're not actually right foods when you do this. Some arguments for fermenting foods is that it increases levels of enzymes, will it increase nutrient levels in the food, it's a useful source of good bacteria, and the foods are in a pre-digested state by the bacteria they contain. Now, arguments against is that it requires a lot of preparation and organisation, and because they are created in an acid environment, some people argue that they have an acidifying effect on the body. Some people also argue, as I already mentioned, that they're not actually live foods, which is obviously the whole point of raw foodism. The next area I'd like to talk about is the alkaline diet. Now, an alkaline diet is also called an acid alkaline diet. It's focused on consuming foods that, when burnt, leave an alkaline residue. This is known as the ash of the food. The burning is likened to the way foods are catabolized within the body to produce waste. So the intention of the diet is to balance body chemistry and help to maintain alkalinity at a cellular level. Now, if the body's pH becomes overly acidic or alkaline,